Hi everyone, this is Karen Smiley. Welcome to 6 Ps and AI Pods on Substack. 4 Pillars of Ethical genAI for Music, Unfair Use Series, Part 2. Clarifying the scope of our series on ethics of generative AI for music, and sharing the 4 pillars of our framework for analyzing ethics to cover the 4 Cs: consent, control, credit, and compensation. The war saying no plan survives first contact with the enemy is also true in writing about topics as dynamic as AI today. This article shares how our plan for the series on ethics of generative AI has evolved since March, and it elaborates on the 4 pillars of our framework for analyzing ethics of AI companies. It is part of our series on ethics of generative AI for music in 6 Ps and AI Pods. Subscribe to be notified automatically when new articles are published. It's free. This article is not a substitute for legal advice and is meant for general information only. A few acronyms that we use: 4 Cs: consent, control, credit, and compensation to contributing artists for use of their content, and QDPs, companies with questionable data practices, term defined by Ed Newton-Rex in his May 22nd Substack article on Suno. AI ethics in music. The field of competitors offering products using generative AI to create musical melodies is vast and growing. Our goal is to help shed light on the ethical positions and risks of these companies and their products. For some, their AI tactics clearly show multiple bright red flags. For others, we just don't know enough yet. We're on a mission to find out and share the info with you so we can all make better informed decisions. So what's ethical in use of generative AI for music? At a minimum, avoiding use of unlicensed content, music and voices, and ensuring the 4 Cs: consent, control, credit, and compensation for contributing artists. See Part 2, and we'll talk about this more below. What fairly trained means. Resistance to exploitative genAI tools has gained traction in the past 6+ months. Example: Ed Newton-Rex, inventor of JukeDeck and lead creator of Stable Audio, quit Stability AI in November 2023 in protest over what he saw as exploitative use of unlicensed content for their image AI product. He now leads a startup called Fairly Trained, focused on verifying whether a model underlying a genAI product has been developed ethically and avoids QDPs, questionable data practices. As we noted in our May 23rd article, complementary approaches to Fairly Trained are now emerging for verifying ethicality of AI-generated music. Example: the May 21st announcement by VoiceSwap and BMAT, the operating system for the music industry, on a partnership to use technology to verify music sources. It's clearly possible that some companies who are operating ethically have not yet undertaken or completed a certification or verification process. We discuss this in our next article, Part 3, where we summarize 85 companies working on generative AI for music. 4 pillars of AI music ethics. As we identified in Part 2, how the underlying model was developed is not the only consideration in whether a genAI-based product is ethical. We are looking at 4 pillars. Each pillar will be the focus of a deep dive in Parts 4 through 7. Pillar 1, Training and Reference Data, which we'll cover in Part 4. Generative AI models and many machine learning models rely on a large base of source data for training a foundational model. Whether an AI or ML model is fairly trained with ethically sourced data covers part of this pillar, but not all of it. If a tool allows users to supply their own song snippets, stems, voices, or reference URLs, ethics require precautions to ensure that these uses are authorized. In either case, ethical tools must ensure that the 4 Cs are covered for the music contributors, for the training data, or reference audio. Contributors deserve the opportunity for meaningful consent, to have control over how their work is used, to be credited when their work is used, and to be compensated fairly for it. The 4 Cs also imply a principle to music users who use these tools to generate new tracks. Ethical tool providers who use these outputs to help train their tools should offer their users the opportunity to consent to use of their work. Ideally, this would be through opt-in. If it's handled through the terms and conditions of use of the tool, ethicality requires that they be highly transparent with their users, that they are waiving their rights to the 4 Cs for their creations in exchange for use of the tool. Pillar 2, traceability and fair use, which we'll cover in Part 5. Traceability and fair use include 2 main things. 1, transparent labeling on whether a track was created with AI, and if so, with which tool. Plus 2, data provenance, so that artists, tool users, and even listeners can know which source music went into an AI-generated track. Pillar 3, bias minimization, which we cover in Part 6. Minimizing bias requires proactive consideration of possible biases in the source datasets. For 1, scrubbing incoming data used for training models to ensure accuracy and validity and to identify sources of bias. 2, ensuring that creeping or injected biases can be prevented, ideally, or detected and mitigated quickly. And 3, ensuring equitable access of the tools, for instance, to disabled users. Detection and mitigation of biases and accessibility issues will always be needed. 100% prevention of bias is likely unachievable. That's no excuse for not diligently addressing prevention as a high priority or not designing upfront for accessibility. Pillar 4, cost-benefit analysis, which we cover in Part 7. Ethicality requires weighing the benefits of AI use versus the costs. Costs must include assessing environmental impact. Training and running generative AI have a heavy ecological footprint. Mapping the 4 pillars to the 4 Cs. So here we have a graphic showing the foundation and 4 pillars of the ethical AI ecosystem for using generative AI in musical melodies. I'll describe it. The foundation at the bottom, it lays why and for whom. That's music contributors, music users, and tool providers, which we covered in Part 1. The next layer up is the how. Ethical guidelines, standards, and laws, global and regional, which we cover in Part 2. And the next layer is the who, what, and when. This is the product and platform providers that we'll be covering in Part 3. Above that layer, there are the 4 pillars, which we just covered. Pillar 1, training and reference data, and Pillar 2, traceability and fair use, are spanned by the 4 Cs, consent, control, credit, and compensation for contributors. Pillars 3 and 4 are separate, Pillar 3 being bias minimization, and Pillar 4 being cost-benefit analysis. The cap above the pillars is organizational lever, harmonizing with ethics and AI governance, and the roof over all of this is the ethics of the AI ecosystem for musical melodies. So the first 2 pillars, training and reference data, traceability and fair use, span the 4 Cs, consent, control, credit, and compensation for music contributors. Therefore, while fair training and support for the 4 Cs are necessary for tools using generative AI models, they are not sufficient for an AI company or product in this space to be fully ethical. All 4 pillars must be covered. In addition to fairly trained and voice swap plus BMAT, other startups are exploring areas relevant to AI ethics for music which align with the 4 pillars. 1, traceability and licensing. An example is Rightsify. Their Hydra music model was fairly trained. 2, transparency about use of AI. Examples are AI Voice Detector and Play HT. And 3rd, bias checking tools. For more on this topic, see Lakshmi Veramani's post on framework supporting GDPR for AI. For now, knowing if a company's products are fairly trained is as good a starting point as any available to us. We use it in Part 3 for grouping and selecting companies to profile. Scope adjustments. Our intro post in mid-March set out our plan for this series on AI for music. In the past 4 months, we've learned more about the topic, and it's clear that the ocean of generative AI for music is too big for just a few contributors to boil quickly. So we've evolved our plan for this series on ethics of AI for music. To keep our quest to a manageable size, we've clarified some boundaries and excluded some scope. Focusing closely on uses of AI for musical melodies will still cover the important companies and ethical concerns that impact all areas of music, and it should continue to provide some insights even beyond music. First, AI versus generative AI in music. As we noted in the introduction to this series, use of transformer-based generative AI for creating music is relatively new. However, AI and non-AI creation of music has been around for many years, and some recently announced AI-based tools aren't actually using generative AI. This next section, credit goes to Lakshmi Viramani. As one example, in 2020, a professor in India announced creating a software tool that used AI to generate Indian classical music. However, it was not generative AI as the term is used today. It was basically a rule-based expert system. The tool did not use a transformer-based model trained on a large repository of songs. It does not have a database of songs. Instead, it generates the required musical data following the rules. The inventor's system, quote, coded the concepts and composition rules of Indian classical music to generate a composition, bandish, every time the dominant and subdominant swaras were provided as input. Other examples. A MIDI melody generator is a free tool from dopeloop.ai that is not based on a GPT or LLM. Its melodies are procedurally generated. Another example, Audio Cipher, is a word-to-MIDI music generator. It is also algorithmic. It uses musical cryptograms, not AI. Text provided by the user is translated letter by letter into music notes. Significant ethical risks in the first two pillars attach to training a generative AI model or machine learning model on a vast repository of possibly unlicensed songs and data. AI tools like these, which don't use generative AI or machine learning, or don't rely on a base of unethically sourced data, do not carry the same risks. However, ethical risk pillars 3 and 4, bias minimization and cost-benefit analysis, may still apply. Some notable exclusions. Exclusion 1, more than melodies, other aspects of generating music. Melodies are far from the only aspects of music that are potentially amenable to AI-based manipulation or generation. At least 10 other types of music tools use AI. Automated mastering, automated translation, enhanced auto-tune, functional music, generating lyrics, music discovery, self-organizing sample managers, stem splitting, voice cloning and synthesis, and vocal covers. For details on these 10, with comments on ethicality, see our May 13th article, More Than Melodies. The last two categories, voice cloning and synthesis and vocal covers, do overlap somewhat with musical melodies. Our April 28th article, AI Ventriloquism, Send in the Clones, already covered voice cloning and vocal covers. Our May 9th article, Say What? Adding Audio Voiceovers with AI Ethically, evaluated 3 likely ethical voice cloning tools, 11 Labs, Speechify, and Wondercraft.ai. However, if you are mulling use of 11 Labs for music generation, see our follow-up profile on 11 Labs. We do not plan further articles on these 10 aspects of AI-generated music. This excludes in-depth analysis on Spotify's use of AI for music recommendation and understanding, functional music companies like Brain.fm, or companies like Musique, who are using AI to support logistics of musician performances. Exclusion 2, musician-controlled initiatives. We assume ethicality for artist-controlled initiatives where they own the AI models they build of their own music and voices. Our post on musician-led AI initiatives shares a diverse set of examples. For voice cloning, Holly Herndon, Grimes, and FKA Twigs. For voice restoration, Randy Travis and Beanie Siegel. For collaborations with deceased musicians, Natalie Cole and Paul McCartney. And for songs by deceased musicians, Kim Kwang-seok, Teresa Teng, and Anita Mui. Exclusion 3, geographic coverage limitations. In-depth information about technology companies based in Eastern Asia is typically lagging and/or scarce on English language websites or even in translations. However, given their activity in other AI areas, the safe assumption is that they are also making strong progress on AI-based TTA, text-to-audio. Chinese company Baidu is the largest AI patent holder in the world, and 01.ai has been leading the way in multimodal open source AI. It would have been surprising to not find AI activity in China relating to music. 4 major companies from China, Korea, and Singapore are covered in our July 1st post, 4 AI music companies in Asia. 2 of the companies have over 100 million users each. All are partnering with major music labels. They are number 1, BandLab Technologies in Singapore. Number 2, ByteDance, the TikTok parent, in China. Number 3, HYBE Supertone in South Korea. And number 4, Tencent Media Entertainment, or TME, in China. The detailed profiles for each company share what we were able to discover about these top 4. Since details on their ethics and training data are sparser, they won't be covered further in parts 4 through 7. What's next? Because of the depth of the information on each of the companies we profile, each profile is in a separate post named for the company. I don't want to overwhelm you all with too many emails about the company profile posts. We have 15 so far, and 16 are in the works. So I'm placing them in a separate section of this newsletter called Profiles. They will not have voiceovers. Current and future subscribers to the newsletter are not opted into Profiles by default. Please subscribe to the Profiles section if you'd like to be notified when new company profiles are posted in the future. In Part 3, we'll identify 85 companies involved in generative AI for music. We are using the 4 pillars described here and the 4 C's to analyze 31 companies in depth. 7 of those companies will be the subjects of deeper analysis versus the 4 pillars in Part 4 through Part 7. See you there. Some credits. Thank you to Ezra Sanzerbell for his helpful explanation on musical cryptograms. Ezra's articles on AI-based music tools are excellent, and I highly recommend following him on the Audio Cipher blog. Thank you.